For decades, the phrase cold case was a synonym for finality. It meant unanswered questions, investigations ground to a halt, and families left with a lifetime of uncertainty. Files were packed away in dusty boxes, evidence was sealed in forgotten lockers, and names slowly faded from public memory. Detectives retired. Witnesses grew old, leads evaporated. For countless families, hope became a painful reminder of what they'd lost. But in recent years, something truly remarkable has started to happen. Incredible advances in forensic science, especially in DNA analysis and genetic genealogy, have begun to breathe new life into cases once considered permanently unsolvable. Evidence that once seemed useless is now telling its story. Bones that lay silent for years are finally being given a name. Killers are being identified decades after they committed their crimes. The past, it turns out, is not nearly as quiet as we once believed. Every year, more and more long-forgotten cases are reopened. Investigators are revisiting old evidence armed with new technology, vast databases, and innovative methods that simply didn't exist when these crimes were first committed. Sometimes, the answers come with astonishing speed. Other times, they arrive painfully late. But they do arrive. Today, we're diving into 3 cases that remained unsolved for decades. Cases that haunted families and tormented investigators until science finally caught up with the truth. These are stories of profound loss, incredible patience, and a long overdue justice that almost never came. Our first story takes us to Bonnie Lake, Washington. On March 2, 1996, 14-year-old Jeffrey Allen Clungness vanished without a trace. On that very same day, his mother, Susan Clungness, was found dead inside their family home. The person who discovered her body was a 41-year-old handyman named Martin Malcolm, a man who had become deeply entangled in the family's life. He told police he had returned home from work and found Susan's body. But from the very beginning, his story didn't add up. It raised immediate red flags for investigators. Why didn't he call 911? Why did he flee the scene instead of getting help? Malcolm wasn't just a random handyman, he was close to the family. They had met him at their church, and over time, his presence became constant. He helped with repairs around the house. He shared meals with them. He even played board games with young Jeffrey and drove the teenager to and from school. To an outsider, he seemed like a trusted friend, a pillar of support. But behind closed doors, a different, more unsettling picture was emerging. In the weeks leading up to her death, Susan confided in her close friends that she was becoming uncomfortable. She felt Malcolm was overstaying his welcome and was especially concerned about his growing closeness to her son. On the day Susan was killed, Malcolm admitted to panicking. Instead of contacting emergency services, he grabbed the keys to Susan's Toyota Camry and just drove away. Investigators later confirmed that he withdrew money from an ATM and, bizarrely, even took Jeffrey for a haircut that same afternoon. But when police finally located Malcolm, Jeffrey was nowhere to be found. The boy had simply disappeared. Malcolm claimed he had no idea where Jeffrey was, offering no explanation for how a teenager under his care could have vanished. Malcolm was arrested, but not for murder or kidnapping. He was charged with possession of stolen property and sentenced to a mere 45 days in jail. After his release, he hired a lawyer, refused to take a polygraph test, and completely stopped cooperating with investigators. Susan S. autopsy later revealed the horrifying truth of her death. She had died from multiple blunt force injuries. This detail sent a chill down the spines of investigators, especially when they uncovered Martin Malcolm's violent past. 16 years earlier, in 1980, Martin Malcolm had been convicted of murder. He had stabbed his wife to death and viciously attacked 2 of her friends. He was sentenced to prison and served 12 years before being released in 1992. Just a few years before he met the Clungness family, despite this shocking history, there was enough physical evidence to directly tie him to Susan S. murder or Jeffrey S. disappearance. Investigators were certain he was their man, but suspicion isn't enough to secure a conviction. The case stalled, leaving Jeffrey's grieving father to live in the same community as the man he believed had destroyed his family. Years turned into agonizing decades. Jeffrey's case became another cold file, a sad story of a missing boy, quietly lingering in police records. Then, in 2017, more than 20 years later, a chance discovery changed everything. A group of mushroom pickers in the Greenwater area of Pierce County stumbled upon a fragment of a human skull. Initial analysis suggested it belonged to a young male and showed clear signs of blunt force trauma. But it would take several more years for forensic science to finally reveal the full, heartbreaking truth behind that discovery. Thanks for watching. In our next video, we'll continue this story and explore how a single piece of bone, combined with cutting-edge technology, finally brought answers to a family that had waited for more than 2 decades. Make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss it. When the skull fragment was discovered in 2017, investigators knew immediately that it could be the key they had been waiting for. The location, deep in the Greenwater area of Pierce County, was remote, wooded, and difficult to access. It was not a place someone would stumble into by accident. The fragment was carefully recovered and sent for analysis. Early examinations indicated that it belonged to a young male and showed clear signs of blunt force trauma. This detail alone sent shockwaves through the investigative team. Jeffrey had vanished at 14. The possibility that his remains had finally been found reopened wounds that had never healed. At the time, however, technology still posed limitations. While DNA extraction was attempted, the sample was degraded. Years passed again, frustratingly slowly. For Jeffrey's father, the wait continued. He lived with the constant knowledge that the man he believed responsible still walked free, still lived nearby, still existed in the same community. Retired Detective Sergeant Lionel Anderson later described the psychological toll this took, explaining that Jeffrey's father would go about his daily life knowing he could run into the suspected killer of his wife and son at the grocery store. In 2020, forensic science finally caught up. Advances in DNA extraction and genetic genealogy allowed scientists to pull a usable DNA profile from the skull fragment. The profile was compared to Jeffrey's half-sister, and the result was definitive. The remains belonged to Jeffrey Allen Clungness. The confirmation led to an expanded search of the surrounding area. Investigators returned to Greenwater with renewed urgency, combing the terrain with fresh eyes. What they found only deepened the horror. Additional skeletal remains were located, along with articles of clothing scattered across the forest floor. The scene told a silent but brutal story. Jeffrey's death was ruled a homicide. The cause, multiple blunt force injuries to the head, mirroring the injuries that had killed his mother decades earlier. For investigators, the parallel was impossible to ignore. 2 victims, same method, same prime suspect. By 2021, the truth was no longer in question. What remained was the unbearable task of informing Jeffrey's father. Investigators wanted to give him closure, to finally tell him what had happened to his son. But fate intervened one last time. By the time the DNA confirmation was complete, Jeffrey's father had been admitted to the hospital, suffering from severe COVID-related complications. Detectives were not allowed to visit him. That same night, before they could speak to him, he passed away. He died without ever knowing that his son had been found. Without knowing that investigators finally had answers, the timing was devastating. Detective Anderson later described it as one of the most painful moments of his career. The truth had arrived, but it arrived too late. Martin Malcolm, the man investigators believed responsible, was never charged. He died in August 2022 at the age of 67. In 2025, the Pierce County Prosecutor's Office confirmed publicly that Malcolm would have been charged with the murders of Susan and Jeffrey Clungness had he still been alive. Justice, in the traditional sense, was never served. But the truth, at least, was no longer buried. On a chilly January evening in 1983, a horrifying discovery was made along a desolate stretch of Interstate 81 in Pennsylvania. The body of a young woman, brutally murdered, was found discarded in the snow. For nearly 4 decades, she would be known only as Jane Doe, her identity a mystery and her killer a ghost. This is the story of Teresa Peroni and the relentless 40-year hunt for justice. Teresa was a 21-year-old mother from Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Friends and family described her as vibrant and full of life, but also as someone who had fallen in with a tough crowd. In late 1982, she made a difficult decision. She left her 2 young children with her parents and headed north with her boyfriend, hoping for a fresh start. But just a few weeks later, all communication from Teresa abruptly stopped. Her family was worried sick, but with no leads and no idea where she might be, their search felt hopeless. Meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, investigators were hitting one dead end after another. The Jane Doe found off the highway had no identification. Her fingerprints and dental records yielded no matches in national databases. They had a victim, but no name. A clay bust was created from her skull in hopes that someone might recognize her, and her case was featured on crime shows, but years turned into decades with no progress. Her case file gathered dust, but it was never forgotten. The breakthrough finally came in 2021, thanks to the incredible advancements in forensic science. Investigators decided to try a new technique, forensic genetic genealogy. They submitted the victim's DNA to a public genealogy database, hoping for a familial match. The gamble paid off. The DNA pointed them to distant relatives, and through painstaking genealogical research, they were able to build a family tree that led them straight to the Peroni family in Florida. After 39 long years, Jane Doe finally had her name back, Teresa Peroni. With her identity confirmed, the investigation kicked into high gear. Police now had a crucial piece of the puzzle. They re-interviewed Teresa's family and learned about the boyfriend she had traveled north with. His name was James Smith. He was now 63 years old and living in South Carolina. When investigators tracked him down, he initially denied even knowing Teresa, but the evidence was mounting. Witnesses from 1983 remembered seeing a woman matching Teresa's description with a man at a local truck stop just before she was killed. Police also re-examined the evidence from the crime scene. A key piece was a small patch from a military-style jacket found near Teresa's body. They learned that Smith had served in the Army and owned a similar jacket. Furthermore, his trucking route in the early 80s took him right through the area where Teresa's body was found. The circumstantial evidence was strong, but they needed something more concrete. The final piece of the puzzle came, once again, from DNA. Investigators obtained a DNA sample from Smith and compared it to evidence collected from Teresa's clothing back in 1983. It was a perfect match. After 40 years of freedom, James Smith was arrested and charged with the murder of Teresa Peroni. For Teresa's family, the arrest brought a wave of complicated emotions, grief for their loss, but also immense relief that the man responsible would finally face justice. Her children, now adults, could finally get the answers they had spent a lifetime waiting for. It's a powerful reminder that even after 4 decades, the pursuit of justice never truly ends. And thanks to the dedication of investigators and the power of science, a family was finally able to find some measure of peace. Thank you for watching.